Have you ever caught yourself avoiding giving opinions at home out of fear of your child's reaction? Have you felt like everything revolves around them and that your feelings seem to not matter? And worse, you start doubting yourself, as if you were the problem. If this sounds familiar, maybe you're dealing with a child who has narcissistic traits. In this video, we'll reveal 7 clear signs that something might be off, and more importantly, how to cope without losing your mental health. Be prepared. Some of these signs might surprise you. My name is Lauren Mitchell, and my purpose with this channel is to show you that the problem was never you. If you're a parent of a teenager or an adult child, you may have already noticed behaviors that seem to go beyond just a difficult phase or the search for independence. Constant complaints about lack of recognition, exaggerated reactions when they aren't praised, or even an air of superiority toward others. All of this may sound like simple arrogance, but it's often more than that. It's important to understand what narcissism means in this context. We're not talking about someone who dresses well, has confidence, or enjoys receiving compliments. All of us seek recognition from time to time. The issue arises when this desire becomes a constant, almost insatiable need and starts affecting relationships around the person. Narcissism, especially in teenagers and young adults, often manifests as a very self-centered personality, difficulty recognizing other people's feelings, and a strong reliance on others' admiration. This doesn't mean the person is bad or incapable of love. Rather, there's an emotional pattern that can make coexistence exhausting and sometimes toxic. A crucial point is understanding that not every narcissistic behavior indicates narcissistic personality disorder. Many young people display traits of this nature during adolescence, a stage where they are building their identity and dealing with social pressures. However, when these traits persist for years, forming a consistent pattern of conflicted relationships, emotional manipulation, and lack of empathy, it's time to take a closer look. And here's the hardest part: recognizing this in your own child. Many parents spend years justifying behaviors with phrases like, "It's just a phase," "He'll mature eventually," or "Maybe I'm asking too much." But the earlier you understand what's going on, the better your chances of acting wisely and protecting your own mental health. We're not talking about labeling or condemning anyone. We're talking about understanding in order to handle. Now, let's dive into the core of the topic: the 7 most common signs of narcissistic traits in teenage and adult children. First sign: excessive need for admiration. Have you noticed how your child always seems to be seeking recognition? Not just occasional praise, but a real need to be the center of attention, constantly applauded for everything they do. It's common to hear statements like, "Did you see how I dressed today?" Or, "No one did that as well as I did." And when they don't receive the expected response, they withdraw, become irritated, or even lash out with direct criticism. "You never appreciate me." This is one of the clearest signs of narcissistic traits: an excessive need for admiration. It's not about vanity or high self-esteem. It runs deeper. It's as if every social interaction had to include some form of personal validation. If that doesn't happen, the reaction can be frustration, anger, or devaluing others. This can create a difficult cycle within the family. Parents begin to feel obligated to constantly praise, trying to avoid conflict. But at the same time, they realize nothing is ever enough. A sincere compliment is met with indifference. Any criticism, no matter how minor, becomes a reason for war. And so, little by little, the relationship starts revolving around the constant desire to be admired. The worst part is that this dynamic affects all family members. Siblings may feel invisible, as if there's only emotional space for one person. The spouse may start questioning whether they're being a good parent, thinking maybe everything depends on them. The problem isn't wanting to be recognized. That's part of human nature. The issue lies in the insatiable dependence on attention and validation, which ends up consuming the emotional energy of those living with this person. Understanding this pattern is essential to prevent it from completely dominating the family environment. Second sign: lack of genuine empathy. Have you noticed how your child seems indifferent to others' suffering? Even when a family member is going through a tough time, they act as if nothing is happening. A sister crying over a heartbreak? She always exaggerates. A sick relative? That's their problem. Even you, as a parent, may feel like your concerns are ignored or downplayed. This is one of the most painful traits to live with: a lack of genuine empathy. We're not talking about temporary coldness or typical teenage immaturity, but rather a consistent pattern of genuine disinterest in other people's feelings. It's as if he simply can't put himself in someone else's shoes, and that hurts. Imagine going through a hard time and turning to someone close, hoping for a bit of listening, affection, or even just respectful silence. Instead, you're met with criticism, sarcasm, or worse, complete disregard. Over time, these situations erode your self-esteem, making you question whether you even have the right to feel what you're feeling. This kind of behavior also affects relationships outside the home. Friendships tend to be superficial, based on mutual benefit rather than emotional connection. Romantic relationships may be marked by use and discard dynamics, where the other person exists only to fuel the need for admiration. And at home, the result is a cold, distant, and often exhausting environment. It's important to understand that this lack of empathy doesn't mean he's incapable of love. Often, he shows affection at certain times, but almost always conditionally. Love exists, but it's given only in proportion to what he gets in return. Recognizing this pattern is the first step to avoiding the trap of thinking that if you just try harder, everything will improve. The change needs to come from him, and you deserve to protect your own emotional energy. Third sign, emotional manipulation. From an early age, have you ever found yourself doing something just to avoid an exaggerated reaction? Have you given in to a request, even though you disagreed, just to avoid hearing things like, "You never really love me," or "No one ever thinks about me"? If so, then you're likely dealing with emotional manipulation. This is one of the hardest signs to recognize because it often looks like just a tantrum or a difficult phase. The difference lies in the pattern. Your child uses emotions like guilt, pity, or even fear to control situations and get what they want. And the more you react, the more they learn that this kind of behavior works. Common phrases include, "If you really cared about me, you'd do this for me," or "Everything always has to go your way. I've never mattered to you." These words carry emotional weight, and over time, they create a constant state of alertness. You start walking on eggshells, avoiding certain topics, choosing your words carefully, as if any feedback could trigger an explosion. And the worst part? The more you try to calm things down, the more space you give for the behavior to repeat itself. Emotional manipulation thrives on your response. When you give in out of exhaustion, when you justify, when you try to rationally explain something that has no logic, you unintentionally reinforce the behavior. The issue goes far beyond small concessions. It can wear down your confidence, leaving you constantly defensive, believing everything you do is wrong. At home, it becomes a silent war where the one who suffers the most is the one trying to keep the peace. Understanding that this is a strategy, and not just rebellion or immaturity, is essential to begin changing the dynamic. You don't need to accept emotional blackmail as part of family life. Your role is to be a parent, not a hostage to his emotions. Fourth sign, exaggerated self-superiority or envy of others. Have you noticed how your child reacts when another family member receives praise? He might downplay the achievement, criticize with sarcasm, or quickly change the subject. And when he himself is praised, it seems like nothing is ever enough. There's always something to add, a justification to show it was harder than it looked, or a detail proving he's better than others. This is sign number 4. Exaggerated self-superiority, or constant envy toward others. Often, this shows up as an air of superiority. Your child might speak with a certain disdain about classmates, friends, or even family members, saying things like, "They were just lucky," or "Anyone could do that." But behind that attitude lies something deeper, insecurity. This need to position himself above others doesn't come from real confidence, but from a constant fear of being seen as ordinary, like everyone else. It's as if he needed to prove, all the time, that he is special, unique, better. And when someone around him stands out, the reaction isn't pride or support. It's discomfort, sometimes even disguised anger. And this can also show up in the form of envy. A sibling with good grades? It was pure luck. A friend with professional success? They only had opportunities because they were born into privilege. In these moments, it becomes clear that there's no genuine celebration of others' achievements. Quite the opposite. There's a certain resistance to acknowledging any merit outside of themselves. This kind of behavior directly affects the family environment. Siblings may start avoiding sharing their accomplishments. You, as a parent, might feel obligated to balance praise carefully, trying not to hurt his ego. And all of this creates a tense atmosphere where sincere recognition becomes something dangerous. It's important to understand that this attitude isn't just arrogance. It's an emotional defense, a way to maintain an idealized image of oneself, even at the expense of others. Fifth sign, extreme reaction to criticism. Have you ever tried to give constructive feedback, and instead of reflection or mature discussion, you got an outburst of anger? It was just a simple observation. Something like, you forgot to take out the trash, or maybe you were a bit rude to your brother. And suddenly, everything turned into an emotional storm. That's the hallmark of sign number 5, extreme reaction to criticism, no matter how minor. We're not talking about temporary irritation or natural self-defense, but rather a disproportionate response, often accompanied by personal attacks, yelling, or even days of hostile silence. And this can be extremely draining for parents, because over time you begin to avoid any kind of correction. You let things slide, not out of agreement, but out of exhaustion. You know that at the slightest comment, you'll face a wave of accusations like, you never support me, you just want to bring me down, or no one ever understands how much I suffer. But behind this intense reaction lies a deep fear, the fear of being seen as imperfect. For someone with narcissistic traits, any criticism, even the mildest, can sound like an attack on their identity. It's as if the idealized image they've built of themselves is too fragile to withstand even the smallest crack. And the worst part is that this dynamic creates an environment where speaking the truth becomes a risk. You start walking on eggshells, avoiding certain topics, choosing your words carefully, as if anything could trigger another explosion. And slowly, the relationship becomes distorted. You feel responsible for his emotions, as if it's your job to keep the peace at all costs. Understanding that these reactions are a form of defense, and not necessarily a display of strength, is essential to avoid falling into the trap of constantly justifying yourself or apologizing for simply existing. You have the right to express your concerns without fear of being attacked. 6th sign, dual behavior, perfect outside, troublesome inside. Have you ever wondered why your child seems so different around other people? At school, he's praised by teachers. With friends, he's friendly, even charismatic. In any public setting, he keeps his composure and knows how to behave. But at home, everything changes. It's as if a mask falls the moment he walks through the door. Patience disappears. Rules are ignored. Any request becomes a reason for argument. And you, as a parent, start feeling a constant fatigue, almost like a low-level tension that never leaves, because you never know which version of him will show up. This is sign number 6. Dual behavior. Perfect outside, problematic inside. And it's one of the most confusing signs for parents, because it creates doubt. Am I exaggerating? Does he act like this only with me? Could I actually be the problem? The answer is no. This type of behavior is not uncommon among teenage or adult children with narcissistic traits. In fact, it's quite common. And there's a simple explanation. Outside the house, there are clear boundaries. He knows he needs to behave well at school, at work, with friends. Otherwise, he'll face real consequences. Plus, he wants to maintain a positive image in front of others. After all, that's what fuels his need for admiration. But at home, where he feels safe, and often untouchable, there's no social pressure to keep up appearances. That's where he can truly be himself, without fear of losing others' approval. And unfortunately, that means parents end up receiving the worst side of his personality. The hardest part is that this difference creates a cruel cycle. When you complain about his behavior, the people around you might doubt you. He's always been so polite with me, they say. And you feel even more alone, thinking maybe you really are imagining things. Recognizing this pattern is essential to stop questioning your own perception. What happens at home matters a lot. You're not going crazy. You're simply living with someone who knows exactly how to hide his flaws from those who don't live with him. 7th sign, creating distorted narratives of reality. Have you ever found yourself trying to talk about something that happened, only to somehow end up being blamed for everything? It was just a simple disagreement, a misunderstanding, or even a routine situation. But when you hear his version, it sounds like you were the villain all along. This is the 7th and final sign, creating distorted narratives of reality, and it may be one of the most emotionally draining behaviors to live with. We're not talking about forgetting details or having different perceptions of an event. That happens to everyone. We're talking about a consistent tendency to rewrite facts in a convenient way, where he's never responsible, and there's always someone else to blame. It's common to hear phrases like, "You've never listened to me, even when you were fully present and attentive," or, "Everyone's always against me," as if every problem were the result of external persecution. And when confronted with the truth, instead of reflecting, he denies, twists, or flips the reasoning entirely. This ability to rewrite reality isn't necessarily intentional in the sense of conscious manipulation. At least, not always. To him, that distorted version might actually feel true, because it's the only way to protect his self-image. Admitting fault would mean acknowledging weakness, something he avoids at all costs. The problem is that living in this environment creates a constant feeling of instability. You start doubting your own memory, your judgment, even your sanity. Many call this passive gaslighting, when the other person distorts reality so much that you begin questioning your own, and this deeply affects communication. Simple conversations turn into battles of versions. Feedback becomes personal attacks. Conflict resolution feels impossible because there's no agreement on what really happened. Recognizing this pattern is essential to protect your mental health. You don't have to accept an alternate version of reality as absolute truth. You have the right to remember things as they were, and to preserve your emotional integrity, even if he insists on rewriting the story. Now that you've recognized the 7 signs, it's time to face the most challenging part: how to deal with this without losing your mental health. This isn't an easy path, but it is possible to move forward with clarity, firmness, and care for yourself. The first step is understanding a fundamental truth. You can't change your child, but you can change how you respond to them, and that change starts from within you. It's not about controlling or forcing someone to change. It's about setting clear boundaries, protecting your own emotional space, and consciously reshaping family dynamics. One of the most important strategies is to stop feeding his constant need for attention and excessive validation. That doesn't mean ignoring him or being cold. Quite the opposite. It means giving genuine recognition only when deserved, without giving in to blackmail or manipulation. Praise sincerely, but not as a bargaining chip. That way, he begins to understand that real admiration cannot be bought with drama. Another crucial point is not falling into emotional traps. When he tries to twist reality or paint you as the villain, calmly hold your ground. There's no need to shout or aggressively deny things. Just calmly state your version. Phrases like, "I remember it differently," or "that wasn't my intention," are simple yet powerful. You're not creating conflict. You're protecting your own perception of reality. It's also essential to set firm and consistent boundaries. Many parents reach this point exhausted, thinking that any boundary will only cause more conflict. But because of that, consistency becomes even more important. Whether it's about curfews, responsibilities at home, or respect during conversations, show through actions that there are real consequences for poor choices. And above all, follow through on what you promise. Consistency speaks louder than any lecture. Equally vital is protecting your emotional energy. Don't feel obligated to respond to every provocation, every unfounded criticism, or every attempt at manipulation. Sometimes silence is the strongest response you can give, and other times, simply walking away from the conversation is the best act of self-care you can offer yourself. And perhaps the hardest part, make it clear that you deserve respect too. There's no healthy love without reciprocity. He doesn't have to agree with everything, but he must learn to express disagreement maturely, without personal attacks or emotional games. And if he can't do that, it's up to you to decide how far you're willing to go. Finally, seek professional help. Individual therapy for him, family therapy for everyone, or even psychological support just for you. Don't see this as a failure, but as an act of care. No one can handle complex situations completely on their own, and seeking support is a sign of strength, not weakness. You don't need to be perfect to deserve respect. Many parents fall into a cruel cycle of constant self-criticism, believing that if they just do everything right, everything will improve. But the truth is, no matter how much you change, some people will still remain dissatisfied. Not because you're wrong, but because they struggle to accept any kind of imperfection, including their own. And this causes a silent kind of wear and tear. You start doubting yourself, questioning your decisions, and over time, you might even feel like you're losing touch with who you truly are. After all, living in constant emotional alert is exhausting, and when you don't take care of it, you eventually reach your breaking point. Tired, frustrated, and unsure of how to move forward. That's why protecting your mental health isn't selfishness. It's emotional survival. Start by recognizing your own limits. Allow yourself to say no when you feel pressured. Take a deep breath before responding to provocation. Walk away from conversations that only feed unnecessary conflict. Small choices like these can completely transform your quality of life. Also, invest in your own emotional support. Talk to someone you trust. Look for parent support groups in similar situations. Or consider therapy. Having a safe space to express your feelings without judgment makes all the difference. You don't have to figure everything out alone. And perhaps most importantly, remember who you are outside of this relationship. You have dreams, interests, values, and so much love to give, but you also deserve to be respected. And while you care for those you love, never stop caring for yourself. This video wasn't meant to label anyone, much less to blame parents who are already carrying a heavy burden. The goal was different, to offer a light in the middle of doubt, a practical guide for those living through a challenging and often silent reality. Also, if this video made sense to you, know that in the description below there's a link to support materials carefully prepared to help you understand what you've been through, recover your self-esteem, and move forward with more peace of mind. If you feel this video added value to your life, please share in the comments the biggest challenge you face when dealing with your child. Be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel too. Go ahead and watch the recommended video on the screen right now. It may bring you even more clarity on this topic. And remember, you are light. Never forget to shine.